Hey everyone, it's Howard Gearhauser with my dad, Dr. G. In this video, we wanted to talk about the importance of getting your family involved in not only your own health journey, but leading by example and being the change that you would like to see in your family. Now, for me, I've been very lucky to have someone like my dad as a role model who's led by example, and who's always asking questions and practicing what he preaches, and that's really, really important. He never pushed things onto me. I followed because he was leading by example, and he's been in the field. So for those of you who are not in maybe the alternative health space and are just learning from our content and other stuff that you're researching, that's fantastic, and hopefully you're really starting to embody those changes. That way, when your kids look at you and they're like, wow, dad or mom or grandma or grandpa, you've really changed. Like, you seem so happy. They'll start asking the questions to you. What is it that you've been doing? So, Dad, what's this been like from your perspective, being kind of the leader, the head of the family who's been pushing this? What was your philosophy, and how could this relate to some of our viewers?
Well, yes, I think that the idea is you always know if you push somebody else too hard, like you want them to do a certain thing, but you don't have that kind of control over another person, even if it's your own kid. You push too hard, and the exact opposite reaction often happens. Like, you say, okay, you can, never watch TV or whatever it is. If you push too hard, then every time your kid stays at someone's house, they're glued to the television, because in our house, we're not allowed to. So that kid, when he's just dreaming of the day when he's on his own, he can watch 24/7 television, and that's the reality. So I realized this early on. When my kids were little, I would take them camping, and I would kind of turn it into a survivalist torture fest. So my kids grew up with an ambivalence about camping and being out in the woods. Well, dad will abandon us when we go out in the woods, because I go, hey, you kids, wait here. And then 10 hours later, I would return and they would be crying. So I realized early on that I was pushing my kids away from it, because I was making the beginning of sleeping out in the woods unfun and torture. So you've got to look at it from the perspective of the other person, and to realize that you cannot totally control the other person. So I tried to then switch gears as my kids, were drawing away from being out in the wilderness, and tried to make it more of an adventure for them, and tried to make it easier on them. And that was a much better path, I learned. And then it's the same thing with the things we teach here. So the blue light from all the devices, the non-native electromagnetic fields, it's our young people that are growing up with this, and they don't know anything different. So they don't realize that we didn't have all this stuff around us. When I was a kid, none of this stuff was there. We didn't have the Star Trek walkie-talkies. Now everyone has one. Every single person, every single teenager has one, and they're staring at it constantly. They don't realize that our cells communicate with these same waves, and we're finding hundreds and hundreds of studies showing negative biologic effects from this. So you can't deny that this is not good. But I also knew that my kids are still going to have cell phones, and I'm still going to use a cell phone. So I poured into it to see, what are things that we could do that people will do. Buy a case for it that blocks EMF. Find a program you can download that takes some of the blue out of the screen, baby steps. And then hopefully someday they will go off the grid. Like hopefully someday I do that on a regular basis, go off the grid to give my body a chance to recover from all this stress in our modern society. But of course, very small portion of the population is going to go that far. But it worked well for me. My kids are all on board now, even though they live in places where I want them to move. You know, if you're in a big city, you are vulnerable to what all of the lemmings are doing around you. And so you can't control that. And, you know, that's why I think a big city is a tough nut to crack.
Yeah, and I think it like my dad mentioned, it's coming from who you want to change, coming from their perspective and realizing that change isn't always easy, and just because you want them to change doesn't necessarily mean they're ready to change. So it's more important to focus on your own evolution as a person and lead by example, by being happier, by being more loving, by being more appreciative of their company, coming from that place. Because when they see that change and they start opening up and asking questions about, like, what have you been doing, and you're not being pushy about it, and you say, hey, go check out these videos, these guys have a really cool perspective that I thought you might like. Do it in a way where it's really coming from a loving place and not from a place of judgment, like I'm right and you're wrong, because that's really easy to pick up on. And as my dad mentioned, if you try forcing things on people, they're going to go in the opposite direction, and they'll do things just because they resent you, not even if it makes them happy necessarily doing it the other way. So it's really important that you come from a place of love, but that you lead by example first. If you're also recommending all this stuff and you're not doing it, they're going to think you're a hypocrite. So you have to embody it. Get your own house in order first before you start preaching to other people. Make sure that you're living it. And when your vibrational frequency elevates and you're just so loving to your children or to your spouse or to your parents, or maybe it's a friend who needs the help, that's the place. Because as soon as you start telling them what to do and they're not ready to hear it, they won't listen to you again. So be careful with that. You know, we've also created these resources so you don't necessarily have to try and explain everything to them. If you want to share some of these videos, it's kind of a way to maybe step aside as you're working on yourself to say, hey, here's something maybe I thought you'd be interested in, or a cool tip. And you could share our videos. And there's a lot of other people out there too with great information that you can share. So that's another tidbit. But it is important to get your family on board, but that's how you have to do it. Can't force your way through, but we know you love them and you care about them. So work on yourself so that they can see the change in you and want to make the change themselves. Anything you want to add to that, Dad?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I would add just being aware that, you know, when you get resistance from those people that you're, you know, hoping will come to the light, when you get resistance, that resistance is subconscious, typically. So that person is not even aware that they're resisting you. And so no matter what you do, it isn't going to work because they have a subconscious program that's resisting you and they're not even aware of it. So, you know, that's like, you know, talking to your kids, don't use drugs, don't use drugs, don't use drugs. And then they use drugs because you're an absent parent and you're not, you know, giving them the love they need or whatever it is. You know, just talking about it isn't going to change because they don't have the insight to know that these programs that we always talk about the matrix, but all of us, you know, the media, the television, all this programs this into every single person. There's no way to avoid it, but you can become aware of those subconscious programs. It's not easy. It probably takes a lifetime of, you know, struggling and working on it to get it right, but it's worth it.
Exactly. The subconscious programming, especially when you're younger, you have no clue that that's going on. A lot of people. And then you add in all of the new stuff that we have that's constantly taking our awareness off of ourselves. You know, we get bogged down in it. We're constantly projecting into the future and dwelling in the past and really missing that present moment. So we got to get back in the present moment. But again, it starts with you doing it. being that change, coming from a place of truly loving your kids, your family, whoever it is. And then that's when they start asking the questions. Hey, Dad, what are you doing? Why are you so happy? Boom. Now you have your door open. Now you can tell them. Now you can explain, get them excited about it. And, you know, my dad never pushed me to do everything. I've been working with him for 12 years, and it's just kind of been the way we've been. I've seen him and I've seen how many people we've helped. So that was all the proof I needed. But he's in a unique situation in that he studies this. So if you're not in that space, just implement this in your own life. Be happy, be loving, and I'm sure your kids and your loved ones will be asking the questions. Anything you want to add before we sign off on this?
Yeah, and when they ask, why are you wearing those orange glasses at night? You look weird. And they go, well, I used to be a rock star, and we wear these glasses to cut down the glare, to make it cool.
Exactly. Yeah. To try and make it cool. I mean, being loving is cool to a young kid. So just remember that. We'll see you guys on the next video. Thanks, Dad.
Yeah.